everyone. Got it. Okay. Hi, thanks for joining us today. We are making super cute jewelry with UV resin. And if you aren't familiar with UV resin, you're going to love it. It is so fun to work with and is such a versatile material. This class is going to teach you everything you need to know to get started and all the supplies that you need and hopefully give you some inspiration for your own creations. My name is Stephanie Menor, and let's get started. So let's switch to the top-down camera. We'll give you a little preview of some of the pieces that we're going to be making. So this is a bangle bracelet, and that has some cute little fruit slices in it. And then we have some pendants. These are bezels. So you'll notice that this doesn't have a metal frame, and this, for example, does have a metal frame. These are the two most common ways of working with UV resin. Either to create something like this comes out of a mold, or to create something like this uses a frame that we call a bezel. So we're going to show you how to do both of those two techniques. And with them, you'll be able to make 99% of the UV resin projects that you see out there, just with those two techniques. So let me tell you what supplies you need. If you are crafting along with us, thank you. Join us. We're so happy to have a little crafternoon with you. But let me walk you through what supplies I have going on here. So the first supply and the most important one is the resin itself. So it comes in a bottle like this. This is sold, in fact, everything we're using today is sold in the jewelry making department at Michael's. So the resin comes in a couple different sizes and a couple different types. This is the type that we're using, the only type that we're using today, which is the hard type. Okay, so to go along with the resin, you need a way to cure it. And so we have a UV lamp here. This plugs in to a USB cord. And when you hit the button once, you can see those lights turn on. And this UV light is what cures the resin. UV light is also found in sunlight. So this resin will cure in direct sunlight, actually in indirect sunlight too, but we'll get to that. So you can cure it using a lamp or you can cure it using the sun. Other supplies that I have a group of these little mixing bowls. And these are made of silicone. You can see they're very flexible. It allows you to mix colors or glitter into your resin and then allows you to squeeze it to pour it very easily. We have some assorted different findings. This is how we're going to take what we make and turn it into jewelry. And then I always have a bunch of these wooden sticks here, some scissors. We have some dried flowers and a whole bunch of different glitters and fun stuff to put down inside the resin. So these are some little fruit slices. These are actually polymer clay fruit slices, and they are so fun to work with. We'll get into those. What else? What else do I have? I have an assortment of molds. So these are the silicone molds. This is a ring mold. So if we take a look at it, this makes rings size 5 through size 10. And we're going to make a ring together. I'll show you how to do that. This, if you can tell what this is a hoop mold. Let me pull out some hoops here. Here are some hoops that we made with that mold. So it makes a square-edged hoop in 2 different sizes. That's the bigger size. Here's the smaller size. So we're going to make it in the mold. We pop it out, and then we add this metal piece, and that is what turns it into an earring. So that is our hoop mold. And then I have an assortment of bezels. Bezels, as I said, are jewelry frames. They come in every shape and size and color. And these are some of the ones that we're going to be using today. I think that's about it. Let's dive right into the very first project, which is one of these hoop earrings. So I want to show you, this is actually a bangle made with the fruit slices. How cute is that? we're going to make a matching pair of earrings, hoop earrings, to go with that. And all of these projects that we're working on today, I'm kind of starting at the easiest one and working your way up, but you'll see how easy this material is to work with. All right, so we're going to go straight in to the mold from the bottle of resin. We're just going to pour directly in here. With UV resin, there is no mixing of two parts. You probably are familiar with two-part resin, where you have a part A and a part B, and you have to mix them together to make something. This is not that. This, you saw me, that pours directly out of the bottle into the mold, and that's all you have to do. If you want a clear product, if you want to add color or glitter, we'll do that a little bit later on in the class. You'll see how that works. All right, so I have some resin in here. I'm going to grab my fruit slices, and there's all sorts of fun little fruits in here. I'm going to scoot this down and kind of lay some of these out. Now, these little polymer clay slices are available in lots of different icons. There's flower ones. There's some really fun shapes. But we are doing a fruit theme, so we're going to keep it on theme today. So I am going to pick up one. You notice I put that wood stick into the resin just so that it can pick up. And then I'm going to put each little slice. Sometimes I grab two. That's okay. And put it down inside the mold. And when you are crafting along, in your own time, you can really take your time here to place each fruit exactly where you want it to be. However, I want to do this slightly fast because I want to get through all of the cute projects to show you today. So I'm just gonna keep picking up a little bit of resin, picking up a little fruit, and putting it down in there. And I'm not doing any kind of a pattern. Sometimes they don't want to come up. There we go. I'm not doing any particular pattern. I just want to make sure that maybe the same fruit isn't next to each other. Let's get more of these little guys. So there is a long list of items that you can put inside the resin, just like I'm doing here, put inside of clear resin. Anything from glitter to glitter flakes, sand, different colorants, gosh, just about anything. You can put stones in there, you can put glass beads in there, seed beads. Pretty much can't think of anything you can't use inside the resin as a filler. All right, so now I'm just kind of making sure, turning this around and making sure that I have those where I want them to be. Also, what I can do is pick up the mold. It's clear, so I can see through it, and I can look through the bottom of it up there. I don't want to spill it, but that's just to make sure that from all angles, I have the fruits where I want them to go. So I see a question in the chat. Thank you so much. If you have questions, please do ask them in the chat. If I happen to see them, I will try to answer it live on air. If not, somebody from the company will be there to answer your questions. So we appreciate all of your feedback and questions. The question in the chat was, is it safe to use indoors? And the answer is yes. I'm indoors. This is a well-ventilated area. And I, in fact, always work with it indoors. It's really tricky to work with it outdoors because, like I said, this does cure in sunlight. So if you are working with it outdoors, you're probably going to start curing it before you want to, and you might get some funky results that way. So just be careful with that. If you have a sensitivity to resin, if you've had a problem before, if you have a breathing problem, a skin sensitivity, you want to tailor, obviously, any safety precautions to that. So you can use a mask with this, you can use gloves with this, but you can see. So I've kind of laid them in there. Now I have not filled the cavity of this mold up to the top. And the reason is because if I go in with more resin right now and fill that up, I'm going to disperse all of those fruits that I just so carefully placed in there. So I don't want to do that, but what I want to do is lock those in place. So I'm going to do kind of like a pre-cure. So I bring the lamp in, and you'll notice that mold fits directly under the lamp. I'm going to hit the button. And so those are going, those are cooking. So each time I hit that button, it runs for 1 minute. It's on a self timer, it will automatically turn off. And then you would roll it again for, if you want to go more than a minute. Typical cure times are 2 to 3 minutes, I would say. However, if you're putting a lot of glitter, a lot of stuff in there, a lot of dark tints, you need to cure it for longer because this cures in light. So if those light beams can't reach what it needs to reach, it's going to take longer. So for this step, this sort of pre-curing that we're doing, I'm just going to let it go for 1 minute. It'll turn off automatically, and then I can go to the next layer. And so just in general, layering with this product is really helpful. All right, so that's going. And that just turned off. So let me move this away and see what we have there. All right, and now I just want to fill the mold cavity up to the top. So directly from the bottle again. I'm just running a bead of resin, and I do want to fill it all the way to the top. It's a little hard to see because it's clear, but you can get closer to it. You can pick it up. You can move it in different ways so that you can really see. Can you see? There we go. See what's going on there. All right, this looks good to me. I don't see any bubbles. I don't see any problems. I don't see any air pockets. Hopefully that will be the case when we demold it. So let's bring our lamp in again. That's going to run for another couple minutes. And let's talk further about cure times. So as I said, under the lamp, this is a 9-watt UV lamp. Is 2 to 3, maybe 4, maybe even 5 minutes. It just depends on what you're making, how thick it is, how blocked it is from the sun or from the light. If you are curing it outside on a sunny day, you may only need 5, 6, 7 minutes. Even on a cloudy day, there's indirect UV light out there. It could be 20 minutes. It really just depends on these, the weather conditions. Another question in the chat, how do you clean spilled resin? That's a great question. Nobody's asked me that before, so you get a prize. I honestly, if I spilled resin on this surface, I would try to scrape it up. I would probably try to scrape it up with a stick or a tool, and try to scrape it into a bowl so that I don't lose any. That's how I would clean it up. Otherwise, if it's just a tiny little bit, I'm going to run this for another minute. If it's just a tiny little bit, you can just pick it up with a paper towel and put it in the trash. I always keep a paper towel off here to the side. So everything I'm doing with this wood stick, I kind of wipe it off so that I don't get resin everywhere. Another thing that I recommend is this thing, this blue thing that you're looking at is actually a silicone mat. And it protects your work surface. And you'll notice a lot of the things are silicone. The molds are silicone. The little bowl is silicone. That is because resin does not stick to silicone when it is cured. All right, so this has been going for about 1.5 minutes. We're going to pop it out, but first I want to show you the next step. So the next step, to turn this into an earring, we need something to put it through our ear. So we need this little thing here. Woo. It is a flat pad earring stud. And we're going to glue that on one side. And the glue that we're going to use is actually just more UV resin. So this is what we have. You'll notice that when you're done curing it, it will be warm. So there's some warmth here. So just be careful with that. but you can see that it easily wants to pop out of there. I like to kind of stick my finger through the back of it and it pops right out. And this is what we have. It's still a little bit warm. And I saw here on this side, let me see if I can get you to see it. There's a little bit of extra resin. Can you guys see right here? So when you're working with a mold, that's natural, that's gonna happen, and you can clean it up. So I go in with a little jewelry plier and kind of snip at it, or sometimes I just go in with my thumb and kind of scrape my thumb, and it takes, oh, here's a little extra. Let's see some extra resin right there. So I can just scrape that away with my thumb. It's just a very thin bit. If your thumb trick isn't working, you can always go in with a nail file and kind of file that away. But you'll find that it's not really necessary when you are using a mold. It comes out very, very clean. So cute. Let's add our earring back. So to do that, take a little tiny bead of UV resin directly onto my silicone mat. I'm going to grab this and I put it here in the resin. Oh, actually, I'm going to grab it with some pliers because it's a little hard to hold on to. So I dip and then I place. So I can place it here or I can place it here. Let's place it here and get it centered in the space. Now I'm going to bring the light to it and shine that light on there, and that's going to lock it in place. So we're using the resin as a glue, which is a great use of it. It cures, it makes a very, very strong bond between the resin and this metal piece. We had a question in the chat, how do you know when it's fully cured? Well, you know because it's solid. It will remain in a liquid state until it's cured. But when you're working with a mold, I always like just to make sure before I pop it out of there, I kind of poke at it a little bit. I'll show you in the next piece. I kind of poke at it a little bit just to make sure that it's ready. All right, so now that's already grabbed on there. I don't need to keep holding it. I can just set it down. Another question in the chat, can you over cure it? I have not found that I can over cure it. In fact, I left some pieces by accident out in the sunlight for a few days on my back porch, forgot about them completely. And when I came back, they were fine. And they were in intense California sunlight for like 48 hours and it was fine. It was no problem. So I don't think that there's a possibility of over curing. Another question I saw, what is the alternative of using a UV light? The only alternative is the sun. You need UV rays, and that either comes from a human-made source like this, a UV lamp, or from the sun. And honestly, curing in the sun, you get a pure, deep cure that that is great. So if it's a sunny day, go ahead and try it outside. All right, so that's gone for a little while. You can see that we have a hoop earring that's ready to wear. How cute is that? And it matches our bangle. So we're styling over here. Okay, so that's our first project. This is the easiest project. That project involved just putting clear resin into a mold, putting some cool stuff in there and popping it out, okay? So moving on to sort of the next level, that's when we're gonna get to bezels. So like I said, these are bezels. When you're using bezels, you need a special product that is this. This is tape, but it's a special tape. Let me find the edge here. This is a special low tack polyester tape. You have to use this when you're working with bezels. I'm just going to cut off a piece of it. And so I have this sticky side up. You see it sticking to my thumb there. And here I have a bezel, and I stick the bezel on the tape and then press it. I want to make sure that that tape is stuck to the back of this bezel. If it's not stuck well, you're going to get some weird things happening. You're going to get some spillage. We don't want that. You might get some weird bubbling because it's pulling in air, but that is fairly well stuck on there. So now I go in directly with my resin. When you're using a bezel, you need the tape, as I said, and you need to do this very first step, which is creating a very thin first layer. This is going to save you headaches later on. I'm going to bring you guys in a little bit if I can. Oh, come on. There we go. Woo! Zoom in, zoom out. Okay. All right, so then I go in with the wood stick. I'm just bringing that resin to the walls. What we're doing is creating a thin first layer. As I said, this is going to save you headache later because this is going to stop any seepage from popping out of the bottom here before you're ready. All right, so just a very thin layer. I filled that maybe a third of the way, less than that, a quarter of the way up with resin. And let's cure that. So these steps of taking your bezel, using the tape, doing a thin first layer and curing that first layer, you do that with every bezel project. And that kind of prepares the bezels to be used. Okay, and this one, I was gonna do more fruits, but I'm gonna show you a special technique. We're gonna add a background. So let me scooch this off to the side so that you can still see what I'm doing. This little thing from earlier, see, it's now hard. I can just move it off of my, that's why I love to work on silicone. All right, let me show you how to mix. Ooh. So here's our silicone. Bubbles. Thank you for your question about bubbles. If you are seeing bubbles in the resin, and I'm going to hold this up really close, you can see I have no bubbles there. But if you are seeing bubbles, the best time and really the only time to deal with those is before you cure the resin. Once that resin's cured, that bubble's in there forever. All right, so I'm doing just a tiny little bit of resin in this cup. There's a question, my UV resin is a little clumpy. Clumpy? Okay, I haven't heard that one before. Clumpy to me means that maybe at some point it was exposed to some UV light. And so portions of it got hard and portions of it are still liquid. Maybe that? Do you think that could possibly be it? Okay, I'm bringing just some glitter. This is ultra fine glitter. And I always like to say with glitter, you measure with your heart as much as you want in there. I put quite a bit of glitter for that little bit of resin. Let's stir it up. I wanted this glitter to be completely opaque. You know, I didn't want there to be a lot of spaces between the glitter because I'm using this as a background, and I'll show you what I mean. All right, and we just pour it in there. And again, I'm looking for a very thin layer. I don't want to really like put a ton of this in there because I have more layers that I'm going to add on top. And again, bringing that to the walls. And you can take as much time as you want getting that perfect. I see I missed a spot here. This will remain liquid like this until you expose it to UV light. So you can come back to it tomorrow, next week. And if it's indoors and it's not like sun shining through a window, it will absolutely still be liquid. All right, let's put that under there. And while that's going, I want to show you. So this is basically the project that we're making now. However, I'm putting a gold background behind the fruit so that they show up just like a little better. So while that's going, I'm going to show you, do a little show and tell of some bezel projects that we have made. So this is a bezel that we've turned into an earring. You can see how easy that is. And in this one, we've used some chunkier, flaky glitter and some extra fine glitter. A question, is there a reason the entire project isn't under the light? I do that just so that you can see that there's something cooking there. That light is really spreading out on your work surface, so it's getting all of the light that it needs. Here in this bezel, we used a dried flower. That's one of the most popular uses of bezels. Here, I'll show you another one. So that uses some dried flowers of different colors. This one has a little glitter in it. Here we've done some confetti. Are these real flowers? Absolutely. These are real flowers. These are also available for sale where you buy the resin. And those flowers look something like this in the package. There's a lot of different types of flowers. This is one of them. And it has several different coordinated flowers in here along with some greenery. And we're going to use that in the next project. All right, so that went for a minute. So now I have my background and I'm going to add fruits on top of that. So let's bring in these again. And I'm going to put just a drop of the resin on here, spread that out again. This is so when I lay that fruit in here, it has something to stick to. It'll stay. Oop. There you go. So these are little slices made of polymer clay. However, they could be pieces of paper. They could be stickers. There is just such a long list of things that you can put in the resin to make your design. All right, that's all I'm going to do. And let's cure that down. So you notice that I'm doing this in layers. I started with a clear layer. That's the standard clear layer that you do for every bezel project. Then I did a background layer. That background was the gold glitter. Then on top of that, I put more resin and the slices. And I'm curing that layer. Now the final thing is we're going to just do a top coat. I'll do some show and tell. These are mold projects. These are earrings that we made in a mold. This one has such pretty flowers. I love this one. This one, these are real candy sprinkles. Isn't that so cute? I love using candy sprinkles. The other thing I love using are seed beads. Here's another hoop mold. that we just put seed beads down in there, and look how cute. If you ever feel so ham-handed dealing with beads and these tiny, tiny little things, UV resin's the thing for you because you get kind of a beaded look without having to do the work. This is another earring that we made out of a mold. And this uses all kinds of little flower confetti. Very pretty. Question in the chat. What is the difference between UV resin and epoxy? The difference is that epoxy resin are two-part resins. Sometimes people call it AB resin because you have a part A and a part B, and you need to mix them together very carefully and precisely. And you can see that with UV resin, there's none of that mixing needed. So that's the difference. The UV resin is not, you don't have to mix two parts together and it cures in UV light. Two-part resin, epoxy resin, AB resin, all of those come in two parts that you mix together, and they don't cure instantly like this. They take about 24 to 36 hours to cure. So this is your instant gratification product here. All right, so this is just about ready. You can see if I turn it this way, I haven't filled it the whole way. And that's what I'm going to do now. So I'm just making a top coat because we want this to be pretty and shiny. And I like to use the wood stick, just go around the edges just to make sure there's no puckering, that all of that resin has reached the edges. And this is our final cure. So it seems like a simple project. It is a simple project, but there just are steps to it. And I'm showing you the best practices of working with this material. Best practice is to do it in layers. All right, so I'm just going to move this off to the side and let that cure. And we are going to move on to the next project, which is this watermelon. So here is the next step up in difficulty, but it still uses a bezel, but we're just getting more complex with what we're putting in that bezel. So here's our triangle bezel. You'll notice this triangle has a bevel. It's a bevel to the bezel. So it's, there's a definite front and a back to this one. Like this is the back, this is the front. Not all bezels are like that. Some are interchangeable, front and back. All right, so we do our process here of working with the bezel. We get some tape. Like I said, this is special polyester tape. You may think, oh, I can just use my mailing tape. Don't do that. You're going to be disappointed with the results because that tape is going to become ultra, ultra sticky in this curing process, and it's going to be hard to work with. Okay, so let me bring we're going to have to mix a couple things here. So first, I need to mix a tiny little bit of white and a tiny little bit of green. Move this to the side. So to add color, these are tints. So they're available in 6 shades. And you want to shake them up well. And you just need a tiny little bit of tint. I'm going to add 1 drop. Actually, we'll add 2 drops of yellow. And a tiny, if I can manage, a half drop of the blue. That's what I want. These colors are very concentrated. And so you can see just the tiniest little bit that I'm adding makes a big difference. So let's stir that up and see what we get. Okay. And with my paper towel, wiping that stick off. And in this bowl, we're going to use some white. I'm going to do 2 drops of white in there. All right, and now we want to start, oops, not yet. I didn't do what I said that I needed to do. Oh, we stuck it down on the tape, and then I need a thin layer of the resin. I almost forgot to do that myself. So we put a little resin, we move it to the edges with our stick. You can see that it is self-leveling. So when I pull my stick through there, it kind of levels itself, but it needs a little help getting to the edges. Okay, let's cure that. While that's curing, let's take a look at this guy. He turned out so cute. So when you're done, you just peel the tape off. It's a lot harder to peel off because the tackiness of this increases while it is curing. And this is what we're left with. This is what the back looks like. So now you have this thing that you can turn into earrings. You can turn into a necklace pendant. You can turn into a charm for your charm bracelet. So it has a loop up here to the top. And if I, for example, wanted to turn this into an earring, I need 2 things. I need a jump ring, and I need something to go through my ear like this. This is called an ear wire. And you need a pair of pliers. So we use the jump ring to connect this to this. So we open the jump ring like this, like this. Now that's open. Put that through. Before we close the jump ring, we also add that ear wire and close it up. And there, we have an earring. Of course, you need to make 2 of them, but that's how simple and easy. You can see the shine on there. It's very shiny. It's got a glass-like finish. Very nice. Okay, so let's go back to our watermelon here. So the first thing I'm going to do is take green, and I want to place a line of green up here at the top. And I want to keep that as close to the side or to the top as I can. Just kind of painting that on. And you notice I'm not putting a lot. I'm just putting enough so that you can see the green. And now I'm going to take my green and white and move them away because I'm going to bring this light in to cure that in place. I want to keep that light away from my mixing bowls because it will get chunky in there. We don't want that. All right, so really this is another pre-cure. Again, working in layers. So we just want to keep that green where it is. We don't want it to move. And then the next layer down that we do is a white layer. So I just let that go for 1 minute. A question in the chat, couldn't you use a fine tip paintbrush instead of the orange stick? Absolutely, you could. In fact, I have a paintbrush here in my tools that I use for that purpose. It will kind of ruin your brush though, just so you know, you don't use your, fine art paintbrushes for that. And that's the only reason I don't do it. I find it's easy with something that has a hard tip, but paintbrush works too. All right, so right next to that, we want to do some white. And I'm just doing enough to bring it across. Okay, let's cure that. So now I have these two guys with some leftover resin. I can pour that into another project. You never are going to waste your resin. You can keep this on your work table in your craft room, wherever you create. Keep it covered with something, or maybe a cup over to the top of it, and it's going to stay liquid until the next time you craft. So you're not going to be wasting any of this. All right, and now while that's going, I'm going to move it off to the side again, and I'm going to mix up our pink watermelon color. So I put a little more in the cup, and I'm using this color. This is pink. And I'm just going to do one drop. So I want this to be fairly transparent. So let's see what one drop does. I like it. All right. So we're going to go in with our pink color, and I'm going to concentrate this pink color down here at the tip. What I'm trying to achieve here is a little bit of an ombre effect. So the pink color goes down here. And I can go in with more clear directly from the bottle and aim that up here, because that is going to kind of push that pink down and also fill up the top. And then I can go in here and kind of tease at the transition between the pink and the clear. And that's how I want to, I'm trying to get a smooth transition here. And I'm trying to avoid any of that pink going over the top of where I put the white. So I can kind of comb it down a little bit to control where that goes. Yeah, looking good. I like it. I'm going to put just one more drop of the pink down here at the bottom. All right, let's cure it. So I pretty much filled that bezel up pretty much to the top. I left a little space because in the next step, we need to add the little watermelon seeds. And when we first made this project, we made those seeds with a marker. You can use a marker as long as you are trapping that marker in between two layers of resin. You don't want to just draw on it with marker and walk away. You need to trap that between two layers of resin because it will just rub away. All right, so here you can see what's happening is I am getting a bubble. This can happen sometimes. A bubble can appear as you're curing it. And unfortunately, it's a little hard to fix, but I'll show you how to fix it. So this is still under there, still going. All right. I'm actually going to cure that a little bit more just because I want to make sure that that is cured. So bubbling can happen, but you find ways to work around it, which is what we're going to do now. So as I said, for those watermelon seeds, I could go in with a Sharpie and draw directly on this layer and then put another layer over top of it. But I happen to have black glitter, and this is like hexagonal glitter, chunky glitter that comes in a bunch of different glitter sizes. So I can just kind of pick out the sizes that I want to create those. Now to make them stick, I'm going to put another very small layer. And I'm going to get a little creative with what I'm putting on that layer. So for example, if I didn't want black dots, maybe I want rhinestones. Rhinestones will cover that up. I'm going to put a rhinestone directly on top of that bubble. Let's put more rhinestones. This works great with glass rhinestones or plastic rhinestones. Some black rhinestones would be really cute here. I actually like these rhinestones better than I like the black glitter, so this is maybe a little happy accident. Oh, that one got flipped over. Flip. Come on. But you can see here, just with moving this rhinestone around, this is why you want to do layers, because had I not locked in those bottom layers, adding these rhinestone pieces would have been a disaster. So now I'm just wondering if I should do some symmetrical pattern, like 1, 2, 1, 1, or if I should try to do a little more random. And that is great thing about UV resin is you can take your time to do this. You don't have to worry. It's not like super glue where the minute these things touch, they're going to grab. All right, I'm going to go with that. And let's lock those into place. So thank you guys for joining. I still have one more project, so don't go anywhere, but I just thank you for making it this far. I hope that what we're doing is inspiring you to try this out yourself, maybe taking a little bit of the mystique away from this product. We do UV resin classes once a month. We also teach polymer clay jewelry making classes twice a month. All of it's going to be on michaels.com, so be on the lookout for future classes. Would love if you join us again. We try to mix it up. We're going to be showing you different projects, different techniques every time. All right, so I'm going to let that go, and let's work on our final project together. And that is going to be a ring. So this is the ring mold that I showed you earlier. And it can be a little tricky to work with because the mold, there's this very small gap there. But I'm going to show you some little tips and tricks. So again, going in straight with the resin, and I want to fill this maybe about halfway. And the next thing I'm going to do is I still have this gold that I mixed up. I want to use that. And I'm going to use that here in this piece by dipping little bits of gold in there. Now, this ring making is a trust the process type of a moment because this is going to go through a really ugly and crazy looking stage before it looks awesome. So, you can see that I'm kind of like sticking that gold glitter in there and it's getting really messy, but don't worry about the mess. We're gonna fix that all up. All right, and let's take some some of our little fruity pieces. And we put them down in there. Sometimes it doesn't want to pick up. Let's try this side. Come here. Okay, here we go. So I'm just trying to kind of evenly space these and tucking them down in there. Let's get this watermelon. Apple. One more. Okay, so we've got glitter in there, a little bit of resin, and our fruit slices. And now I'm just taking a look to see if I need to scoot any of these over so that there's no crowding. All right. And we're going to finish with more resin, which I'm going to kind of pour on top. It will settle into that channel. And I can kind of, I'm kind of like moving the resin around in there. I'm making sure that it's getting down in there. Because it's such a tight mold, you know, there can be voids, air pockets. We don't want those. We want it to be filled to the top. And again, just working with the mold to make sure that there are no air pockets. And I've overfilled it just slightly. Then what I like to do is go in with a wet paper towel or a baby wipe. And this is your little trick to clean that up. So I have a wet paper towel and just drag it across with no pressure at all. And that is going to get rid of any excess that you have. Let's cure it. So this is one of the few projects that you saw me do where I didn't do layers. There were no pre-curing layers. I went straight in with the resin, then the glitter, then the fruit slices, and filled it up to the top. So it really kind of depends on what you're making, the kind of steps. You'll get a feel for it as you go. Yeah. All right, so while that's going, let's get our happy accident here. So I'm sad about that bubble, but I'm happy that I'm happy that I got to show you how to disguise things, how to work with it. This is what we ended up with. So I can turn this into a pin. Let me show you all the things I can turn it into. If I wanted to turn this into a lapel pin, I'd bring something like this out. So this is a flat back pin. And I would adhere that to the back with UV resin. I'd be left with this loop at the top, which I can just snip off if I don't want that loop to be there. So that's one thing I can do. Second thing I can do, I could turn it into an earring by using a jump ring and an ear wire. Okay. What else can I do with it? Well, I can turn it into a hair clip. If I had something like this, little, little hair clip, use some more UV resin to stick that on here. You'd want to clip off the end. You can turn this into a necklace pendant by adding a jump ring, sliding a necklace through there. So once you make your thing, then there's a lot of ways to use it. Necklaces, bracelets, earrings, all of the ways. All right, so this has already gone once. I'm letting it go again just to be sure. And for that person who asked earlier, how do I check if it's cured? I kind of push it like this. And that's how I can see, oh, it's cured or it's got a little stickiness to it. This is cured. So let's pop it out. And this is what you get. So it has a little extra flash on it. So I can just, it just kind of peels off, you know. I can go in there and make sure it's smooth. If it's not, nail file, smooth that up. But you can see that I love that little bit. Oh, you can't even see. Here we go. I love that little bit of glitter. For me, that just like elevates it. But here we have a custom ring. I'll show you a couple other options of what you can do with the rings. Sorry, guys, that was my light falling down. Go. Here's another ring that we made, and we put a gem on the front of it. You can make a separate mold. This rose is something that came from a separate mold, and add that to the top of it to make a ring with a focal. And that is exactly what we did here on this example. This little butterfly came out of a mold. And so once we had both the ring and the butterfly, we put them together using UV resin as an adhesive. So lots of other examples out there. I hope that you guys found some inspiration to go out and create these things on your own. So thank you so much for joining us. As I said, we do these classes every month. So be on the lookout for michaels.com. And in fact, on Monday, we're doing a polymer clay jewelry making class. So if you're into jewelry making, expand your horizons with polymer clay. It's super fun. Thank you all for joining us and for making it to the end. See you next time.